You hear that? It's a sound of the underground. Feel it flowing, sweet, profound. What he promised, proven. Here it's found. Pour out, ain't no doubt he's willing, filling, spilling, sweet as could be. This life of the free, grafted in vine and growing, divine inspiration showing. Abide in me. You might think you know now, but you'll understand when you see.
What's going on, ASTROVILLEans? We're back with episode 2 of season 2. Oh Lord, I'm so excited right now. I can't hold it all in. Today's gonna be awesome. I've been looking forward to this for probably a week and a half. So I've got a guest here. Now I've known this guy for maybe a year, but we've only really started to get to know each other more intimately, like maybe a couple months ago, and even more like in the last few days. And I'm blown away by this guy. Not to puff him up, man. Just chill. It's all good. It's all good. This man is Jason Lee Durant. Did I say that right?
Durant, either way.
Okay, I botched it. I know. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So, the reason why I wanted to have you on is because you just seem like an interesting fella, and I
appreciate that.
Yeah. You're definitely unique, and the way you talked, I knew that there was a lot going on up in there, up in that old noggin. So, I was like, I want to do a show with you, but I was like, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. But, so I asked you, I'm like, so what do you do? Tell me a little about yourself. And I found out you're a poet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
So, well, we'll get more into this later, but since then I found more things we have in common, and I'm mind blown. So let's get right into this. I want to know a little more about you and how you got into poetry, how you came up. Mm-hmm. What's going on?
Okay. Yeah, it's actually a really interesting story. Various reasons for it, but I guess going back to like the beginning, if I'm going to go and just start at the beginning, it started with needing an outlet to go and basically communicate my feelings. And I guess, as you probably know, guys have a little bit more of a hard time and less outlets to communicate their feelings than I would say the opposite sex.
I think that's right. We should put a pin in that one too.
Yes, for sure. So essentially, to be honest, like instead of doing a journal, which was the obvious like first, option, I didn't trust my family enough to do a journal. And so I was like, what do I do? And I think at one point I was watching this show, like My So-Called Life. Never actually told anybody that. Yeah. It's like 90s, early 90s show. And I wrote this poem, like really short in this tiny little scrap of paper, not even realizing it was a poem at the time. And from that point, just kept on writing, from there. And
how old were you?
18. So, been writing poetry for 20 plus years, pretty consistently, 3.
They don't believe you. 20 plus years.
Actually, it's more like almost 3 years now. Like it's close.
Look at this man's face. He's not telling the truth. He's still in his 20s.
No, it's God's good.
Yes.
Put it that way. So yeah, after that, pretty much just doing and compiling and keeping these journals of poetry. And from that point, I didn't really think of it as anything but like a cathartic activity to go and like help me process, and didn't show anybody. Some of it I still have, and some of it's really, really bad. Not necessarily for public consumption, but from that point, like there was a moment where I heard about a poetry reading at Barnes and Noble, and I was like, just decided to start carrying my journal around to see if when I run into them when I was at Barnes and Noble, because I used to go there all the time. And I ended up going in there and running into them. I sat down with them and I had my journals with me. And they asked me to read, and I read something, like really just very embarrassed, just quietly. And afterwards, and we did like an activity and everything, and like I wrote something on the spot because I've been writing it so long. Like I didn't think that was a big deal or impressive at all. And afterwards, the guy that was running it ended up being an English teacher, and he asked me, he's like, "Do you ever think about publishing your poetry?" And I was like,
"Oh, you said publishing."
Publishing, yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, "Did you just hear what I read to you? It was terrible. Like I couldn't possibly publish. Just had no confidence whatsoever in my writing." And he was like, "It's actually pretty good. You should really seriously think about it." He took me to like the section in Barnes & Noble that you can just submit to. There's a whole book actually, and they publish every year for people that want to publish to send to publishers. So they specifically like will go and receive your stuff and then determine whether or not it's publish worthy. Yeah. So of course I didn't take him up on it because I had no confidence in my writing.
And this is when you were how old? Like
this is probably 23, 24.
Okay.
But then I kind of opened my eyes to like the wider world of poetry, and I started reading like Pablo Neruda and Baudelaire, which are non-English writers actually, but also Marge Piercy and some other American writers as well.
I don't know any of these people.
Yeah, there's a lot of actual, like, it's a pretty huge world. It's a pretty deep, but it's also kind of niche.
It's like you open a can of worms, but it's like a whole warehouse in there.
There's a lot, actually. I mean, the tradition of American poetry goes back like to the beginning of America. Like even the Star Spangled Banner is written by someone that many would consider an American poet.
Do you recognize like a thread throughout American poetry?
Yeah.
Like, how would you describe that?
I mean, the theme of freedom, America's, heart, freedom, self-reliance, rebellion, yeah, for sure. And then of course also challenging social norms. I would say they'd be a major part of it too, component. But I think that's the nature of poetry as well.
Wait, before you go on, because I wanna look into some of the parallels, because one thing that I noticed, I mean, so like rap is poetry also, and we're talking about like you comparing and contrasting rap to poetry, and like one of the things was cadence. Like with poetry, you don't have to ride the beat; you make your own beat as you go. But with rap, it's like you have to abide by this. And you can break the rules sometimes, and actually some, like nowadays they're just breaking the rules and it doesn't sound good. But like they were starting way before the beat drops. It's not good. But God bless them. I hope they can figure that out. So that's one thing. But you were talking about some thread, a common theme through American poetry. So you said freedom, self-reliance, rebellion,
and challenging social norms.
Challenging social norms. And I would say that is actually like spot on for rap too.
Actually, you might know, some people don't though. RAP is an acronym for Rhythmic American Poetry. So
stop playing.
No, that's what RAP stands for.
All right, but did they get it from like rap tap, and then they were like, oh, we could put words to this?
No, I don't, like, as far as like where that acronym came from, like how that came to be, I don't know. That's like,
you don't know if the
stuff.
Rap word came first or the acronym came first?
I'm pretty sure the acronym came first.
That's interesting. Yeah. I never even heard of that before. Rhythmic American poetry. So you heard that Britain, stop rapping. You got to figure something else out. Get your own thing.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm pretty sure that rap originated in America and then it spread to other countries. So.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So I'm not a rapper, but I can appreciate the poetry in rap. And the other part to keep in mind too is classic poetry, coming from, even England and even before that in other countries. Um, like like your part to it doesn't have to be rhythmic, but traditionally there was a cadence to it. There were rules and there's conventions for writing poetry. Sonnets and other forms of poetry. And so only like in the modern era did we start going and like breaking the rules and the convention, and modern poetry came to be and like a free form poetry. So there's different methods and styles or whatever. My poetry group that I was part of back in 2014 to 2016 or so, they actually did challenges where we would do themed nights, and one of the themes was like to write a poem in a particular form, so form night, and then everyone would like have to pick their form and then stick to it all 3 rounds. But I'll get into that probably a little later as far as like what is slam and how does that work.
So that might be a parallel to like rap battles or something.
Yeah, similar,
something like that. That's very interesting. The first time I read poetry, I don't even know what I felt. It was like a mix between frustration because I didn't understand what I was reading, but also like I was gripped by it, and I was almost angry too because I was like, it was like something veiled, and so there's something behind the veil, and it seems to be beautiful, but I can't see it.
Right.
And I'm just like, I wish I could just pull the veil away so I could just have a full understanding, because there's something about this that's gripping my soul, and I don't know what it is, and I don't understand it. And, I actually haven't really read poetry or been involved with it much since then, except for every now and then I'll write a poem to my wife. Yeah. And, I don't know where they are. Maybe I'll give you one and you can tell me if it's crap.
I'd love to go and see that, actually. That'd be great.
All right.
If we've read anything by, some of the playwrights, much of what they write is, constituting poetry, or similar to, especially there are certain passages that are more poetic than others,
So I guess I'm wrong then. So I've read some Shakespeare, and then how about Psalms?
Yeah, we're talking about
the translation, though. I think that might bring it. I was gonna say I might bring an issue, but some of that has been partially resolved through the Passion translation of the Bible, and they are really focused on the love in the word, and so the first ones they really did was Psalms, Song of Solomon, I think, and then the New Testament, and maybe Proverbs too. I'm not sure, but it's like reading the Passion translation, especially Song of Songs.
I haven't read.
I read that. I've read that a few times before. I'm like, what the heck am I reading? Like, why is this in the Bible? Like, it's sexual. It's provocative. It's really engaging and also a bit confusing. And so that's where a lot of the frustration came. I'm like, what am I reading? I don't get it. Even like Revelation seems a little poetic, but when I read the Passion translation of Song of Solomon, it's like the veil is coming off a bit, Nice.
I actually really love that book, to be honest.
Song of Solomon?
Yeah, Song of Solomon, for a variety of reasons, but partially because of the poetic nature of it. I've never read it in the Passion translation, to be honest, but even in the other versions, there are just certain parts of it that are so powerful and compelling. And I think to get a better understanding of that, like, you have to go to why it was written, like the story itself. And this all comes down to, like, in the nature of the Bible anyway, theology is when you understand the origins and the backstory, it makes it a lot more clear. Like the story itself, the basis for it is about Solomon and the Shulamite woman, and they never really like name her like her first name, her real name, but like she's like Shulamite, I do believe, is her tribe, and so he's like they're going back and forth. It's like, and they even do modern poetry. We do that too, where you can do a poem with someone else, and so it's like a 2-person poem. And one person goes and does one part, and the other person does like a refrain or like a reflection of it, and you can go back and forth. So there's like a lot of different ways to express it.
That's actually one of the things I wanted to do with Julio. I just showed him a song, and I was like, yo, I don't know anybody who, like, I've been sitting on this one. I want someone on it, but I don't know. I haven't met somebody yet that I think, and I was like, I think you might be that guy. And so I was telling him today, like, instead of, because he was like, I'm going to go to the studio and write it, right? So I'm like, wait, instead of doing that, why don't we meet together and we can write the song together and go back and forth? For
sure. And there's different ways, like performance versus creation too. You know, that's also another, process. I actually work really well with, doing that. And I don't get a chance to do that very often. Even writing poetry, there's a method where you can go and write one line, and then you hand that line to the other person, and then they write the next line, and then you hand it back. So you go back and forth writing lines.
You got to trust humanity for that.
It's
or vibe actually, with somebody.
Yeah, for sure. But it comes down to like your creative process and your ability to go and just on the spot see what the theme is, or go and steer that theme.
Kind of like this.
Yeah,
what we're doing right here.
Yes,
a little bit.
So going back to Solomon, so it's beautiful, the relation that builds between this man and woman, but also I really think the reason why it's in the Bible, honestly, is because it is about the true or a pure concept of what relationship should look like in the courtship process. And the certain refrains like that I didn't really understand until, I should say, didn't fully understand the depth of it until I've gotten into the position that I am now, where I'm like about to be married and have my fiance, and like parts like it says, "My sister, my bride," and I'm like, when I was younger, I was like, "What? My sister, my like this is like a little incestuous." What
That's
they're talking
when I
about.
Closed the book.
And then I was like, now that I'm in the position, I'm like, oh, I understand. My sister, my bride is about like loving and honoring and believing in your woman beyond just, this person to be with, this person that's a sexual object. Like you're like your sister. You'd want to go and respect her and honor her and love her and want the best for her and think of all the things that she might desire, all her dreams, and wanting those to come to fruition just the same way you'd want your sisters to, that same level of like relation. But at the same time, it being a deeper, you going deeper with this person than you ever could with your own family. So, but it's where you are in that process of like moving from, I know this person, I love them, I respect them the same way I would my sister, and then I'm going to moving in this place of even greater depth and understanding.
So I could be wrong, but it seemed to me like the last time I was reading it that they were getting a little freaky before they were even together. You know what that's about?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, honestly, getting
like, why would you put that in the Bible? You know what I'm saying? If that's what it was.
I think the way the order, because it's poetic license, I really think, and keeping in mind also biblical marriages are a little different than ours. They go and briefly describe the marriage, and they didn't do anything in the story before that, but they don't really go into depth with like the marriage ceremony in the story itself. Like there's a certain part where he shows up at her door and she doesn't want to get up. And that's not like him trying to go and get with her before. That's like soon before. And so that after that point, there's other things. But I really think there is a level poetic license, or perhaps the way they organize marriage is a little different. And Solomon being known for what he was like, who knows?
Yeah, he was a freak. That's for sure.
Lots of wives. So
yeah.
So I guess you want to go back to the story because there's
continue on your journey.
The journey. All right. So keeping in mind, I don't want to just go and rep like shout out to Heidi Smith and Joe XO, who were two of the people that are really instrumental in keeping me writing, actually helping me to go and like stay on that journey, because even after that Barnes and Noble experience, like I thought that all poetry was supposed to rhyme. I literally did not know there was another way to do it. So my friend Heidi was like, oh no, you can do this and this. She just showed me some of the stuff she wrote. And I was like, dang, like that's really good. And I started like challenging myself to write differently. And, you know, a couple of years passed, keep writing. And I actually become friends with this guy, Joe, and he starts inviting me to events where people are reading it out loud. And of course, still writing, but not really, never showing it, never sharing it.
And you're a pretty introverted guy, huh?
By nature, yeah, for sure. But this is like, I think what would even giving me the ability to do a show like this, get in a position like this, was going and putting myself out there on the mic. And to be honest, like, and at first it was just readings, just public readings, spoken word events. And I even still have one of the flyers for it too. I think it was Speak Up, Speak Out is what it's called. And I liked it, surprisingly. I thought it was a just good opportunity to go and really challenge myself to see what sounded good in spoken form versus written form, because I realized very quickly, like, what looks good on a page doesn't always sound good when it's spoken out loud.
That's right.
Yeah, for sure. And then Joe, I think maybe a month or two after that one event that was in Cocoa Village, he invited me to go to Daytona for this event. And I had no idea what slam was. I don't know if you do.
I heard of slam when I was at like youth church. Shout out to Pastor Kevin Wright, Catalyst Youth Church. Man, it was we had a blast back in the days. And there was like a rap group. There was like a junior rap group. It was Deep Impact, the seniors, and you had Christ Coast, the juniors, and then you had the slam poetry group, Synergy dance team turned Sanctify dance team. Right. I was so blessed to be in an environment where it was like we could share our art, and so I saw a little bit of that, but not a whole lot. Not a whole lot.
Yeah. So it was definitely different. If you've never experienced slam, it's kind of hard to explain what it's like, because most people, when they think about poetry to begin with, they think about, beat poetry, early.
Beat? What is that?
Like, and then someone says a line and then, and
I don't even know what that is.
Never heard of that?
No.
So that is like early 90s. Beat poetry was hot. Was the thing. Okay. Yeah. Going in hipster, like primordial hipsters, basically, like hanging out in coffee shops and like doing this thing. And then it basically evolved from there, where people started going and doing competition form of it. Where essentially, you go and I'm not going to go into like the full details. Like it's actually pretty complex, but they organize a method to go and judge between different poems and score them, and then come out with a winner. So it's like a actual like sport in a way.
Just the rap battles.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. And I don't know about how rap battles organize, but
I don't either. I've never been in one.
Extremely serious. Like these people do not play. But at first, like when I went to the Daytona, Joe was like super slick with it too. He didn't read; he's super casual. And we go to the coffee shop, and this weird guy shows up. It has a bandana on and starts talking to us. And I had no idea who this dude was. He just acted like he knew Joe, so I figured, let's just play it cool. And this guy's like, "Oh, you're gonna be in the slam?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You bring some poems, like you can go and slam your poetry." And I'm like, "What is that?" And he was like, "It's competition poetry." And I'm like, how can you compete with poetry? It's, it's totally subjective. It's art. That's like me going and bringing one painting and you bring another painting and then someone judging between which one's better. Like that's stupid. And he's like, well, you're not going to win with that kind of attitude.
I got a question. So we're noticing so many parallels between poetry and rap. But I want to ask, like, can you think of other art forms that have that competitive, aside from sports, because I guess you could say that's a little bit artistic, more of a kinesthetic art. But I'm racking my brain and I can't really think of any other form of art that has such a competitive edge.
I wouldn't say there are a lot of other forms that are that creative. Like you could say, there's some degree of like martial arts, but again, most of that is already, it's not on the spot or it's not so cerebral, you might say. So yeah, between, rap or poetry, and it is kind of unique.
And it's like, to me, it feels like with rap and with poetry, like you want to win, you're trying to get somewhere though. It's like you're trying to get somewhere. You don't know exactly what that is, and maybe it takes other people to help you get there. But that aspect of competition, maybe it's the words.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in the power of the tongue.
We can get there for sure. Yeah, and that I mean, origins of the language and what the Bible talks about when it comes to the power of the tongue and communication, which is why I think poetry is so powerful, honestly, because it is so essentially internal and a true expression.
I think that's it. I think it's the winning is finding the truth. Who's the truest?
So this is my take on slam, and we can go and we can explore this for sure.
Okay.
I think after I went and saw this, like, make a long story short, like, saw this slam, I was like, yes, I'm in. I wanted to get in right then, and had no idea like what it takes to actually do it, because my thought was at the time, I'm a good writer. I've been writing for 6-8 years at that point. I have stuff I can go and the essence of slam, much like performance, many other performance arts, is performance. So it is your delivery, it's your poise, it's your vocal tone, your cadence, timing, even just stage presence,
Yep.
charisma.
Yeah. It's crazy how I have no idea about poetry, but I know exactly what you're talking about, because it's like, that's poetry and rap is like brother and sister, or brother and brother. I don't know. I'm sorry.
It's awesome.
Rap could be the sister.
No, you're good. Yeah. Gender's not really a very big thing in poetry. They're actually pretty big on going and ignoring a lot of that stuff, or recognizing the unrecognized. So like, I would say it's performance art is in the essence of it. However, many other performance arts don't have that degree or that option of competition. You don't really have competition comedy. Sorry, comedians. There are, I'm sure, comedians that are disagree with me, because they do kind of have that, but
like Wild and Out a little bit.
Yeah, but like a scoring system and like prize money, it doesn't really happen that much. It's more about just having the jokes,
right,
versus competing for or competing against, directly against, because they actually have head-to-head slams too, where it's like one person goes, another person goes, and you vote who you think wins. So that's another form.
The only time I saw anything like that was on The Last Airbender. The cartoon one, when they're in the Fire Nation and Sokka goes and he's watching all these girls through the window doing poetry, and then he falls through the window, and then they're battling with haikus.
Oh yeah. It was just at a slam, they did a haiku slam, like the precursor to the rest of it. He's like,
that's one too many syllables, bub, and tosses him out the door.
Yeah, it's 5-7-5. You got to go and keep it right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that's a whole nother thing too. Another form of poetry that's super fun, haikus.
That Japanese.
It is Japanese originally. However, the modern, because Japanese language being formatted differently than English, it's easier to formulate a haiku in Japanese than it is in English. So that 575 is very strict in Japanese, but for English, it's really just I think 17 syllables. You know, so if the word has two parts to it, then that counts as like another part. Yeah, yeah.
Getting a little loose, Americans.
I mean, English is that language. It's so funny because I was thinking about this on the way over. I'm like, I don't think English is one of the original languages that came from the Tower of Babel. You know, the origins of the language when God like separated all the people. I think there were certain primordial languages we can, excuse me, we can see that are not in use anymore, but that do have roots. Like, you know, Cyrillic is a written language, but they don't really have it spoken. You know, Russian came out of it, a couple other languages. We have Latin, but Latin's not really spoken anymore. There's other languages come out of it.
Spanish, French, Italian.
Yeah, Romanian. Yeah.
That came from Latin too?
Latin based, yeah. German as well, believe it or not. Yeah. So knowing the origins of language, you know, helps you to kind of like appreciate English more though, because it takes from so many other different languages. And then it has so much flexibility. I that's what I'm really passionate about poetry, at least in great part, because poetry in English has such, you know, depth and breadth that you can't really do as much in other languages as in English. Now, of course, English is my primary language, and if I were to become fluent in another language, I'm sure there are ways to create poetry that would be unique to those languages that English couldn't, you know, reproduce. For instance, haiku being the, you know, perfect example in Japanese. And it reflects the nature of the culture oftentimes. You know, haiku is very precise and very encapsulated, and in that there's a stillness to the creation of it, even the timing of it, that emphasizes the meaning almost more than the words. And so it's very much a Japanese concept of going and saying more with less, and emphasizing a meaning that's between the words and not necessarily said in the words.
That's mind-blowing. Like the way you just described that, like I'm not even hearing poetry, I'm just hearing like about that form of poetry, and I think that's just so beautiful. And then also, you know, you were talking about English being flexible, and you know, when you said that, I thought about my friend Matthew Z. He was on he'll be back, by the way, but he was on like the first 3 episodes of the first season, right? And one point that he brought up, and this is more of a political issue, but he was talking about how he's like, he thinks the English language has just been bastardized. And I think it goes back to the truth, like finding the truth, like that evolution and flexibility of our language to draw from other languages. I think if the heart behind it is we're trying to get to truth,
right,
and maybe unity too, you know, so if this word means something, right, for you, it should mean the same thing for me, right? Nowadays, you got phrases and words, and that it's like for you, it means one thing, but for a particular political party, it means something completely different. Yeah. Like equity versus equality. There's a bastardization of a word right there. I don't want to go too deep into that, but do you think there's a limit to the evolution, or like, do you think we should slow it down, or like, because even in like rap, like some rap songs, I have no idea what they're talking about with slang. And what do you think about the conservation of the language versus the evolution of it?
That's a new thought. I like it a lot. I personally am all for English being a living language. I actually have invented my own word several times while writing, where it's like there's no real word for it. So I'll create a adjunct word or an entirely new word. And sometimes I realize it, sometimes I don't. And which can be, shocking sometimes when you find out, like someone will point it out, be like, what's that word? And you'll be like, I thought it meant this. And you're like, no, that doesn't actually, that's not the word. However, that's the beauty of English, I really think, is to be able to go and, it's live, breathe. There are many other languages that don't have that option.
Wow. I didn't even know that.
Like, for instance, and this is just as my understanding of the language, like German, oftentimes to create a word that for a thing that didn't exist when the language came into being, they combine multiple words to create a new word, like spaceship, like a rocket ship is like a long metal tube that goes and flies in the air. Like that's, loose translation. But yeah, like they all just slam all those words together and then that's the new word for that thing that didn't exist before. Whereas in English, it's like, we're going to come up with a word that sounds, appropriate for this thing.
Yeah, it feels it. It feels like that, I think there's so many parallels, man. Like sometimes when I write raps, I don't know if I've made up any words. No, I definitely have made up words. Actually, yeah, I have. But also another thing that I do is sometimes I misuse grammar, or I'll use a word that really doesn't belong there, but it feels right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I might have drawn that from poetry.
I mean,
it's like, but the purpose is maybe not to say something that's so precise, but to kind of paint a picture for you, to give you a feeling so it's like, rather than knowing what I'm talking about, you're feeling what I'm talking about.
I mean, that is I think the point. Even going back to, who wins, I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to say who wins slam is the most truthful. I would go and say the person who wins typically is the person who believes the most in what they're saying.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
There's another parallel right there, because I was telling you the other day, like I've sent people home during recording sessions like, look, this verse is dope, the beat is dope, but I don't believe what you're saying. So like you're saying that you believe it, but I don't believe it because, it's not coming through the way you're performing it, the way you're
articulating.
Yeah, there's another word, I think. I don't know what it is, but we'll find it maybe. But, go home, read your verse, reconnect with it, relive it. If it's memories, if it's situations you've been in, if it's feelings, like go through all that again, then come back and spit it for me. And it's crazy. And like I said that to Dominique one time. I think it was for the song Forgiveness that he had way back. And I didn't send him home. I was just like, bro, I don't believe what you're saying. And he like for probably like 10, 20 minutes, he's like, bro, what are you talking about? Like, I'm spitting the verse, I'm going hard, but I'm like, there's just something, it's not alive, And like, he stopped for a little bit, and then I don't know what he did inside. Maybe he relived that verse or something, but then he came back, and that next take was, woo! We're done. Yeah. Wrap the session up. That's the one. Yeah, that's it right there.
Sure. I love that you bring this up, actually, because it's something that I am really, challenging myself to grow in. And it's so nebulous as far as what exactly that is. Like,
right.
It's like when you have it, you have it. And when you don't, you don't. And people can feel it.
Yeah.
You can't really say like how you get there. It's almost like, flow state, but it's almost like, just being convinced. It's something like that. And
yeah.
I don't even think there might be a word in English for it.
We're going to have to make one up then. Maybe by the end of this.
Bro. Let's do it. So that exactly is one of the challenges of poetry and particularly slam, where you can have the best writing, you can have even like good stage presence, and even the cadence and the timing and everything and like down, but it's just like not there. And the worst is like when you get into it too late in the poem. Like you'll start out and the nerves will get you, and you're thinking about, and it's not necessarily that you don't believe what you're talking about, you're just not in the state of belief to go and actually make it convincing to everyone that's watching or listening, and you'll miss it. And like that was what killed me actually in the first couple, I probably did like 4 or 5 slams and just got miserable scores. And
Dang, they score everybody.
oh yeah,
they don't just do
bro.
the best one.
No, bro. Everybody. It's round by round. It's 3-round elimination. Like 6,
What is the score, like 1 to 10?
1 to 10 with decimals. So
Okay.
1.9, 1 zeros. If you really hate
Do you
it.
remember what you got for your first few?
You mean as far as like total scores? Like I was getting like 25s, after everything's added up. So what they do is they usually have 4 to 5 judges,
Okay.
eliminate the top 2, and then just have the 3 total, the middle ones added together, so give you an average.
Okay, so it's more like 1 to 40.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, it's more like 1 to 30 is what it ends up being total.
Right.
Like, so if you do just a fire piece, it's going to be like 3 10s in the middle. That's almost impossible to get. Like almost no one gets that. More like 29, 28, stuff like that. And that's like, you did really, really well. And actually, I just went to the Blackberry Peach, shout out to Noir Gent, who helped organize that and invited me to it. And that, like, almost everybody that was in the finals was getting 27, 28, 29, like every single round. And that just goes to like show like these are judges, and these judges also are writers. Most of them are writers. And so they have more critical, appreciation for or thought toward English and poetry than most people. And they're giving those kind of scores. So, and they're not drinking. This is normally, they call it a stupid bar game. So a lot of people are drinking when they're like doing judging for slam. These people are completely sober. So it's really competitive.
Wow.
And, that particular one, I think they had a total of like $5,000 of prize money on the line. I think the winner got like 3,000 if I remember correctly. So people, like, it pulls so much out of people. This is the other thing too, I guess I wanted to mention about slam, is like the difference between reading and slamming is like usually there's a prize on the line, 1, and 2, because of the competitive nature. And this is my conclusion I drew, was like, at first I didn't like it, but then I grew to like it because it pulled something out of me I didn't have before. The challenge to be like better than I ever was before, write better than I ever was before, do something I never did before, and like face my fear, getting up on stage, sharing something that's from my inner being, from my my soul, with a group of people a lot of them I never met before, and letting them judge me, and then going and coming out of it like alive. It's like similar to, I guess, combat sports, what people say, that combat sport high where you get in the ring and you like are fighting and it's almost like life or death. And they actually say that they've done studies where people are asked a question, if you would you prefer do a public speaking event or die? And people will literally say they'd rather die than do public speaking. And I think that's just so telling for like what poetry is. So it's like the next level of public speaking. It's not just talking about a topic.
Yeah, dang, that's so heavy, man. Yeah. That's crazy. So I don't know much about rap battles, so I can't really go that direction on that parallel. But for me, it's just been kind of like stage performing, mostly in the context of like ministry, and other than performing, there's the writing and recording, and I make beats and record and mix and all that stuff. So and for a while I stopped writing. I kind of actually switched to rock and roll for a while. And, I wrote a bunch of songs and, but I never had a band, so I could never make these songs. So I came back to rap and, I did some features and stuff like that. But I was like, I want to work on a project, but, I don't know what, so I was just like praying, God, give me vision for a project. And so like I got one and it was bonkers. And so it's a double thing. So it's 2 projects of 7 songs that are released as like, yin yang type thing. And I've got a couple of them done. But I feel like part of my journey, my life journey, is producing these songs.
Okay.
But there is one thing that a lot of times I do feel a lack of motivation to work on this project, to, get some of it done. And I think maybe part of what I'm missing is that challenge aspect.
I feel you on that. What? There are several like ideas or concepts or like poetry themes, you might say, that I've done. Excuse me, and then even like published that were themed. I found that usually they're interspersed between other ones though, and when I sit down and try to write a one singular concept, it's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
However, it is super, I think, important to have that kind of motivation, that fire to like finish it. And maybe, and for like when I'm hearing what you're saying, maybe just that you need to go and like set a date or have someone go and help like spark that, like where you either do something creative that goes and motivates you toward that, whatever the theme might be, maybe doing something in that vein that might go and actually motivate you toward going and, creating more of that. I realize that like for me, one, watching movies, listening to music, and sometimes even just travel goes and really like just gets that flowing.
Wow.
And honestly, writing more, not being so restricted by your concept of like, what is, what am I supposed to write about? What am I writing about? Just write something.
And there's also, I think I heard this idea from Jordan Peterson where he's, I think he was like teaching a class or something, and he said something like, pick something.
Oh, like I guess love.
So I don't think that's what he did, but it was similar to that. And like the whole class was like, and he's like, so the issue is unless you put constraints, like total freedom will just leave you motionless.
Right.
But if you put constraints and give yourself context, then you're able to create. And I think, part of getting the concept for the project was like, it did give me that push. And I think, there's like the other day, my wife and I came up here and we just had karaoke over there.
Nice.
And it was fun. And like, it was a date night, and we're trying to work out, we're getting older, more mature, and like I don't really like going out anymore. And I think she's starting to get to that point too. And we're like, we need to do something that we both love, that's fun, and so we came over. We had a blast. I was just like, our date night, we're just gonna make music together, whatever that looks like.
Nice.
And so we had a blast, man. And like, but I think doing more stuff like that is gonna kind of put me back into having that push and that desire to really get some work done on this project.
Nice. Yeah, my fiance, shout out to Emma. I love you. She sometimes will catch me like going and getting off in the corner and writing like in times when I should be socializing because I will like get an idea in the midst of doing something or an event, and then get this out, I have to get this down, and will like basically anti-socialize, in the midst of it, because and should use the term loosely, the muse, won't go and wait for anyone. And
wow, did you come up with that?
That's off the top of my head, man.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, I mean,
I gotta say,
it's the muse, like, and of course, the muse just being like our creative instinct. They even Andrew Huberman, I think, talks about it. The states of being, states of mind.
Huberman is a
neuroscientist.
Okay, I know who that is. I just got put onto him recently.
Yeah, he's dope. So like, there's so much that he like actually breaks down that I'm like, oh, I've experienced that before. I didn't realize that's what that is. So like when you wake up, for instance, and this is where I guess I was going. One of the things I wanted to bring up, actually, intersection of prophecy and poetry.
Whoa. Okay.
Where in the dream state, you're in a certain, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but you're in a, I do believe it's theta, or delta. I think you're in delta, and you come into theta when you wake up. So if you have a bad dream, and I encourage like other people to do this, like if you have a bad dream, you're in a mind state where if you think about the dream and imagine the way you want to actually have the dream resolved, which is better, then you convince your subconscious mind and your actual like your neurology, that's what happened, because your brain really doesn't know the difference. So you're basically hypnotizing yourself, or allowing yourself to be hypnotized into the thing you want versus the thing your mind created, or your spirit, was feeling, or what being influenced by. And I think personally that's a form of spiritual warfare. Like, you have a dream and you have a memory, and if you don't like the memory, you can make a conscious decision, especially in that mind state, before you go and shift into your day and everything, and it just becomes this thing in the back of your head. And I'm sure all of us probably experienced that.
Wow.
Have this bad dream that follows you into your day, and you're like, man, I'm in this bad mood because I'm just thinking about this horrible thing that didn't actually even happen in real life, but I feel bad about it, have emotion about it.
Wow.
And making a decision to go and change it. And that's kind of like, in the same way, poetry can do something similar. When you're listening to poetry, it's kind of like the way music can influence you, and you can feel emotions and relate to a person's feelings on a level that you wouldn't expect, because of what they're talking about. The topic might not even be extremely relatable to you, but because of the emotion and because of the universal nature of what they're communicating, you can actually feel something. And sometimes it's, you have to be considerate of your own, your own self. Like, I try to pray before I go into the slams, but also it gives you this amazing opportunity to really relate to people's experience that are far outside of your own experience, and to be able to have compassion for people that might have suffered through something or felt something that you never might have felt before, or might haven't yet felt. And then being able to go and take that into situations that you might, be able to relate to that later on in life.
Man, you just brought up so many things that I was like, when I was driving over here, there was one thing I was like, I hope we can go into this. And we just naturally got here. So nice. That's so cool. So Huberman.
Yeah.
All right. I gotta tell you a little bit about what I've been experiencing lately.
Yeah.
So, and I know you can relate, because I've told you, we've talked about this a little bit, but so when I was a child, I was diagnosed by a psychiatrist, as having ADHD. And I didn't know what that meant. I was just like, okay, I'm different in some kind of way. My brain is funky, chemical imbalance or something like that. Whatever. All I know is that I don't act right. That's all I know as a child. So I went on a bunch of different medications, amphetamines and non-amphetamines. And so I actually stopped taking them because I just didn't like them, and I felt like they just turned me to a zombie. And so I pretended that I took them, but I didn't take them. I just stopped. And they're like, I don't know if the medicine's working. Sometimes he's a zombie, but then sometimes he's like, it's because I'm not taking my medicine like I should be. And then eventually I just got off all that. And so I grew into a young adult, teenager, young adult. And I honestly didn't know what the symptoms of ADHD even were. I had no idea what it was from the being a teen up until, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. And so I figured, well, it's gone. I act right now, you know, I'm fine now, I guess. I don't know. But looking back, I've noticed like the way I lived my life was like super ADHD. I couldn't keep jobs. Like I'd get a job and be like, yo, this is great. I like this job. You know, I like the people around here. And then 2 weeks later, I freaking hate this place. I got to get out of here. Be like, yo, I got to go find something else. So I went from career path to career path to career path. And it was just like, it was a problem. Especially because it's like, if you want to do some serious stuff in life, they want you to have a job for 2 years, you know? I didn't have none of that. So it was, you know, not until maybe I was a prayer minister on the phone lines. I liked that, and I stayed there for a while. And then I lost my job as a salesman. And you know, because sales for me was like I was too emotionally involved, and I just like, if I was having a bad week or a bad day, I would tank. And so my friend Will was like, he was on season 1. We talked about demons. I was having a bad day. I didn't talk that much, but he'll be back. We'll talk more. I'll talk more. We'll have more of a better interaction. And he's learned so much since then. I can't wait to have him on. But he was like, yo, I know your situation. I need some help. He's got a handyman company, paint company. So he's like, I need some help. So I'm like, all right. He's like, you ever paint before? I'm like, I mean, I've painted my room, you know, like, I don't know. Not really. I mean, I know how to do it, but I mean, maybe I don't. I don't know. Like, I'm not. So he was like, all right, come through. So I would drive from Titusville to Palm Bay every day and go to work. And that changed my life. I absolutely love painting. And if it wasn't such a dangerous job, I would probably do it for the rest of my life. But I'm going to have to switch into something else that I love for the sake of my family at some point, you know? So, but I noticed that the symptoms were mitigated by these jobs.
Yes.
So being a prayer minister and then being a painter, every, when I was working as those things, it was like medication for me. And, so I got injured maybe about a year ago, couldn't work. My wife, she's certified nail technician, certified cosmetologist. So we're like, all right, go, it's your turn, you know? So she's been working, you know, and I've been a homemaker. And this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It's probably the hardest thing that I'll ever do in my life. But, and not just the parenting, but holding the home down, scheduling things, like, it's so much, bro. And like, I feel like I've grown a lot from that experience. And actually today was my very first day back to work as a painter. And my kids are like, my wife's praying like, God, work something out. We really both should be working, you know, but we don't trust nobody with our kids. But what would you know? Our children's godparents opened a daycare. So, and that's Will in Maryland. So Maryland's now doing a daycare. So yeah, today was the start of a new season. And I look back on the one I came out of, and it was like, I think about, what did I learn? And it was like, I learned a lot about myself. Maybe I've grown a little bit. I might have grown some, but I learned a lot about myself. And I also saw these ADHD symptoms more than I ever have in my life. And that's something that, have you been clinically diagnosed with ADHD?
No.
Okay.
But I'm loving this topic because I can see the parallels. I think in a word, if we were going to just encapsulate, and it's more than this, but It's presence.
Presence.
So the struggle for a lot of ADHD people, and I've done some research on this, done some, personal research.
Do you think
I think I have ADD.
Okay.
As far as
attention deficit disorder,
right?
But
I
not
don't have
attention.
the hyperactivity.
I have the hyperactivity.
Yes. So the struggle with the H part is wanting to stay busy and being able to focus. The struggle for me, and that everybody that has, by the way, this is a misconception too. First off, let me just put this out there. Okay. ADHD is not a disease.
Okay. I wanted to talk to you about that. It's not a mental disorder. I think I agree with you on that.
You can't catch it. You can't go and fix it. It's not something to be fixed. It is a neurotype that is basically the way your brain operates. And some people believe that can be more pronounced because of childhood experience, not necessarily even trauma, but just experience. It's like you develop coping mechanisms to manage it. So this all comes together. It's a beautiful, what we're talking, the way this works. So the challenge, for oftentimes, I would say for many, is being present to the moment.
Yeah.
I want to be thinking, even right now, even in the conversation, when you extend a conversation at a certain point, I have to go and purposely make myself be present to the moment versus thinking about all the things that are happening, could be happening,
all the different veins we can go down.
Yeah. Because you can get lost in the potential versus just what is actually, present.
Yes.
Which, even parallels, poetry, for instance. The reason why I think some people are just naturally good, they're very good at being present. If you have a natural presence, then you can go and just focus on what is the emotion I'm trying to convey and let me connect to my audience. Let me look at them. ADD tendency would be you're thinking about every single detail, that your way your hands feel, the way the floor feels, the unnecessary information, and they talk about how it's gates, basically our ability to go and if it's a spotlight, your brain is basically just about receiving information, and then sharing information. And when your ADD has a trouble doing that, sometimes there's certain ways that we go and process information that's like a floodlight, and you're taking in all the information,
all this stuff
at once, and you're like, okay, gotta center myself. Okay.
So the hyperactivity side of it is a pinpoint, right?
The hyperactivity side of it is you wanting to go and physically, not being able to sit still. I have to be involved in some kind of way. I have to be doing something with my hands. I have to be moving my body some way. Very physical people.
What I thought Huberman said about this is that, so maybe not in your case, but I think what he was talking about with the hyperactivity, and it might not have been related to that, but I know he was talking about one of the symptoms is getting hyper focused on something. And it's that happened to me today. I was on the phone with producer Marissa at 4, and I'm on the phone, and I felt like I didn't get enough done today. And it wasn't all my fault, stuff happens. But I just was rolling with the day. But then I was on the phone for a little bit, and I was like, dang, I haven't done anything the whole time I was on the phone. Right. I'm like, I got to get something done. So I started painting, and I was so into it. I had no idea what time it was. You would think I'm supposed to leave at 5. If it's 4:20 and I'm going to start painting, you would think I'd be like, yo, it's 5 o'clock soon here. Nah. 5:20 came around. Someone called me, and I'm like, oh, it's 5:20. I'm like, yo, I'm so glad you called me. But it's amazing too, that the journey that I've been on, at the end, coming to the end of me being a stay-at-home dad.
Sure.
I'm seeing all this stuff, all these symptoms, and I'm like, okay, I got some influence saying, that's not God's will, and we're gonna pray against it, and that's not what we claim over your life, and okay, I agree with that, but also maybe God made me like this for a reason.
Oh, for sure.
And maybe, like we were talking about the autism spectrum, maybe this spectrum is way bigger than we think it is, and maybe everybody's on it.
Yeah.
But to certain degrees, maybe we move around, and some people are maybe just made to be way on this side of it. And I think that like part of the journey for me is like, I'm not going to call it ADHD what I have, right? I don't have ADHD. If you want to say I have ADHD, that's up to you. I have a brain that's specifically made for a purpose. Yeah. And it's been challenging to see how to operate in the world with this type of brain. Right. Not just with what people would call ADHD, but I'm also an aphantasiac, which means that I have no visual imagination. Zero visual imagination. It's affected my memory a lot. The way I memorize things is actually through narratives versus images. And so and I'm not going to self-diagnose. I'm not going to say I'm autistic, but I show some symptoms of that too. Yeah. So it's like, and I'm not interested in going to get diagnosed because I really think that, maybe some of these mental disorders are coming from a demonic realm. Like, there's probably like the crazy man that got delivered and the demons went into the pigs, sure. Right? And then he was in his right mind. Right. But maybe his right mind was just different too, maybe the demons were trying to capitalize on that.
I mean, there's several things you brought up in there. Definitely want to touch on. I think first of all, there is definitely a definitive difference between ADHD, ADD, I hate going to say Asperger's is no longer used, but the spectrum and mental disorder.
Neurodivergent, is that what they call it now?
Like neurotypes, okay. Right? So yeah, different neurotypes. I think is pretty like evident that everybody thinks differently or functions differently in their mind, and it's actually really fascinating just to see how there is such a broad spectrum of function that you don't really even realize until you actually start interacting with people. Like when we first met, I think you said like, I don't have any visual imagination, and it blew my mind because I was like, I'm the exact opposite. I think math problems are pictures, and I have to do the math problem in my mind. Like
I can't even imagine that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is crazy to me, but I love it. I love that they're that different, and yet we can have a conversation like this. And so going to the challenge, going kind of like rolling back a little bit, the challenge of being present for you, I think this is just my take on like what you're talking about. Painting is, like you said, medicine. So the reason though is what we're just bringing all the way back to that singular word, presence. When you're painting, that's all you're thinking about.
Actually, no. I could paint and zone out, and it's like the paint is the medicine, and now I could focus. Mm-hmm. So it's like depending on what I'm thinking about or whatever, and I might just go into a flow and think about all kinds of stuff. And sometimes I'm listening to a podcast or something, but I get hyper focused on whatever I'm actually focused on while I'm painting.
Right. Right. So the hyperactivity aspect is that you're doing something physical. So then your brain is soothed by the physical activity and then can think about the thing that you actually want to be thinking about. So you're doing two things at once. One of my best friends, Alberto Surreal, shout out to him if he's watching, would be like, he'll do three things at once. He'll be watching TV.
This is the man.
He is a dude that I know.
A man.
Yeah.
And he's multitasking.
Oh, for sure. Like he has a hard time not multitasking actually. Like, yeah. He goes and will listen to a podcast in one ear, watch a show on his TV, and be going working on homework as well. And his brain will just be flipping between all of them. And that's the way he functions.
So he flips between them, but can he simultaneously take in the show and the podcast at the same time?
Some people would say that you can't. Scientifically, from what I've heard, you can't do that.
Okay.
You focus has to be directed in one direction. I even found that I have a hard time doing the same type of thing, like talking and listening at the same time. Some people are really good at that. Women actually tend to have a better ability at that than men.
I think I do that pretty well too.
That's impressive. It's impressive. I can do, but my ability tends to be like doing something physical and then doing something mental, like two separate things using your brain, but you're not actually focused on one at the same time. Like I can flip eggs like while I'm cooking and then be listening to like a podcast, and the physical aspect I'm not thinking about. This is just a motor reflex. My brain kind of goes on autopilot.
I'm curious the connection between what is known as ADD, ADHD, and creatives. Yeah. Because it seems to me that if you have that ability or proclivity to get hyper focused on something, that maybe you have a higher power of creation than other people.
Yeah.
Or a deeper ability to create. I wonder if that's connected.
Yeah, I would say, and that's one of the things that other people have said too, like the neurotypes are a superpower. ADHD, ADD is like a superpower if you properly channel it.
Wow.
It can affect your life heavily if you're not going and focusing in the correct directions.
This is like bringing my whole life to a point right here. Yeah. This is crazy because like I never thought about it in that context, but that's like what this whole training session has been about. And I forgot to finish. So like I'm coming to this graduation. You know, I'm about to go to work, right? Okay. I'm about to send my kids to daycare. And they went today. They loved it. Shout out to Marilyn. You are amazing. I just love what you're doing. I know you're doing it even so much better than I've been doing it. And there's no words for how much I appreciate you. And I love you. And wow, thank you. And Will too, you know. But you know, you're not there during the day. Well, you're with me sometimes. So probably about now 3 weeks ago, this is where I came to the point of, I know there's something there, you know? Is it something I need deliverance from? Is it something that God just made me this way? This is something that's like, it's coming to a head. I've got to work this out. And so I'm like, God, I need you to show me what's going on here, because I do not understand. And you know, my wife and I went to some counsel, and you know, another thing. So I don't know if you can relate to this also, but after I got off medicine as a child, when I got into my teens, late teens and 20s, I was experimenting with experimenting with different substances, right? And I found that some would seem to affect these ADHD symptoms, and I found that some of them were able to kick me into that hyperactivity state and be able to focus. And so after experimenting for a while, like one of them, like kratom, I found kratom, and I found that at a certain dosage, it would put me in that state and I would be so efficient. Not only that, but sociable as well. And so that was like it seemed like a miracle. But you know, with all these things, I had to take more and more and more to get the same effects. And that ended badly. I ended up, I'm not sure if this is from the kratom. I think it was a mixture of that plus dehydration, but I had a seizure one night, and my wife was freaking out. I didn't even know what happened. I come to, I had no idea I was unconscious. Apparently I hit my head. I didn't feel it, you know, I bit my tongue, didn't feel that. And there's the ambulance people in there, and they're all asking me questions. I'm like, get out of my house. Like, what are y'all even talking about? Like, looking at my wife, like, are you lying to me? Like, you're like, look me in the face and tell me that I was unconscious. Like, I did not believe it. And long story short, I stopped doing that. And then, it had me like, well, what do I do? What do I do? Because it seemed to me like it wasn't so much like, yeah, I think there's probably a level of euphoria that comes with that. But mostly I wanted to be efficient.
Right.
Especially for my relationships. And so I'm like, I'm not using Kratom. How am I going to go about this? And so long story short, I got to the point where I'm like, I don't know what to do about this anymore. And it seems like these symptoms are negatively affecting my family. And I can't live like that, So I'm like, God, I need an answer. I need you to show me what's going on here. Do I need deliverance? Is this something that is wrong with me? But I had a feeling it wasn't that. And so I'm taking this journey, right? Probably started about 3 weeks ago when I said that. So probably about 2 weeks ago, my wife sends me a video about parenting and dealing with children, right? But in that video, it seemed unrelated to my situation. But in that video, there was a key that I found about my own childhood. About a week later, Jordan Peterson drops a podcast with Huberman, and they talk about what did they talk about? I forgot the topic, but they were basically talking about the relation between neuroscience and psychology, right? And I was so blown away by what this guy, how he was explaining stuff, and it was so practical. And I'm just like, wow. What is his name? Andrew Huberman. Yeah. Check him out. So I'm just like, man, I go to his channel and he's got one on ADHD. So I listened to it, and I got to tell you, it was an answer to the prayer. Absolutely.
Praise the Lord.
And now, like I said earlier, like I agree. I think that, God made us like this for a reason, for a purpose. And it's like, I don't know, we were given certain tools that if we don't know how to use them, they just weigh us down, right? But if we know how to use them, then we gain the strength to bear the tools instead of being, taken back by them. And so that's what I feel like I'm learning now, and I'm transitioning. Like I want to not have any substances, I'm still on caffeine every now and then. And I am taking something called Strattera, and it seems to have been helping with the symptoms, but I actually forgot it today. And for the most part, like, well, I don't know, maybe not. At the end of the day, I was pretty maybe ADHD there, but it seemed like that was doing something for my ability to, because one of the things, it was like finding the motivation to do something. It was like, I have to do something, but I don't know what that something is. Yes. So I'm going to go do this, but that's not it. Let me go do this. That's not it. Let me go do this. That's not it. And it was like, it's the worst, man. It's the worst. And I noticed that taking Strattera, there's way less of that. But I don't want to take that forever, and I don't even want to take it at all. But it is like, it's not a what is it, amphetamine, so that's good. Like Ritalin or Adderall. But what else? Caffeine, Strattera. Oh, kava. I'll drink kava once a week. And but man, I really just want to be able to not have to rely on any kind of substance to regulate my emotions and be able to operate the way that I would like to operate in my life.
There's a lot there too. Yeah, I would say, well, my buddy, once again, Alberto, he regularly takes kava. And I personally think it's a little reckless the way he takes it. Also, however, he's a voracious researcher, And like one of those kind of dudes, because he can multitask like that, he'll listen to an entire like book's worth of information on kava while he's working, and get that in, like actually have a really good retention on it too. He likes to do history, like all the different kinds of like subjects to go and like
Is that why he's drinking kava?
Not why, but
while.
Oh, yeah, of course. Like, yeah. Yeah, so he's the kind of dude that'll like have 4 cups worth of kava and drink them all. And yeah, there are consequences to every kind of substance you're gonna take.
Have you ever had kava?
Yeah. My experience was pretty bad though. The one time I had no, sorry, not kava. Kratom. Kava.
Kratom.
So kava usually just gives a this body calm sense of like almost just peace in your body, but it doesn't get in your head. And I don't know if that's brain body barrier or something like that, or how it works. But I've taken a lot of kava, and literally it was like, being in a waterbed, you're just like super calm, like super chill.
But it's still sober.
But yeah, completely sober, can drive a car, whatever. But with kratom has different effects depending on the color. So each kratom has different...
So it's the strain, red, white, and green. And I think the strains come from when they're harvested. So the younger ones are white, the middle ones are green, and then the more matured is the red. And so I think it's similar to an opioid, but it also depends on how much you take. Similar to like dextromethorphan. I used to mess with that, and there's plateaus to that as well. So with kratom, it's like 1 to 3 grams for a new user. And sometimes the strains don't matter that much, but just like how the strains are white, green, red, which would be something like energizing, then energizing, but also sociable and just chill and stuff. I don't know if chill is in there actually. I don't know. Yeah. But then the red is more like chill. But it also is similar. 1 to 3 grams of either of them is pretty energizing. 3 to 6 is you're kind of buzzing, and then 6 to 10 is like it's nap time.
Yeah,
so,
it was definitely interesting how that works. Supposedly with kratom, it goes by how much you've had, like you kind of experience, where if you've never had it before, you can take a very small amount. It has a much stronger effect, much quicker effect. Unfortunately, my first experience, someone made a glass of, it's like tea. So you go and make it like tea. They put the whole packet into the cup of boiling water, and then I drank it, and
you know how many grams that was?
I have no idea. Probably 3 to 4, like straight off the bat. And I'm one of those people I've noticed, like no matter what it is, I usually will have like very, very limited effect, and like I'm very hyper aware of my like somatic presence and like place. And
somatic, what does that mean?
My body's like presence. So like if I'm drinking and I have no conviction about like drinking in moderation, I'll like know how sober I am even as I'm going into like less and less sobriety, and then I'll be able to say, okay, this is too much.
Same.
Stop.
With alcohol, at least for me.
A lot of people have a harder time, or it goes, in a different kind of pattern. They might start and then go, and like mine's very, very consistent going in, and then there's a certain point of like no return, and usually then it'll shoot off. And I think that's the kind of same thing that happened with the kratom. Like I just had way too much, and for me, like the way it worked, I felt fine, and thank God, drove the car, got to the place I was going, got out of the car and was walking into the door, and it was with the girl I was dating at the time, and like my knees just buckled.
What?
And I'm like just became Gumby, and in my head, like mentally, I felt completely clear, completely sober. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go. It's fine. I guess it's just the kratom kicking in. And she's like, no, you're not going anywhere. And I like had to lay down on the couch and like let it pass or whatever. Because
dang, how many hours was that?
Probably 3 or 4 hours, I think. Shoot. Yeah, it was very like brutal. Intense. But on the other hand, it's not the worst thing. Like my body was really like just relaxed. But other people have different experiences with it. But coming back to the ADD thing, I think for my friend and probably for you, like being able to go and take that hyperactivity aspect away so that when you do something, you can kind of commit to it. Like, okay, this is what I'm doing right now. I'm not thinking about everything else. And even today, I had the same kind of struggle where it's like, there's so many things to do. Which one do I focus on first? And then I start focusing on that one, and I notice another one, and I'm like, go to that. And then that whole squirrel, effect, people call it that squirrel effect.
Never heard that, but that's that hits
squirrel.
home. Yep,
Squirrel. Yeah.
that definitely hits home.
So I have a question though that this kind of conversation is bringing up. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. How, when someone tells you like an analogy, or when you read the Bible, let's say, and Jesus talks about like, a concept, what do you see in your mind when he's like,
Oh, you're asking me like my imagination.
like how do you
when
experience a tree planted by streams of living water? Like, what do you see or feel or think in your mind?
So this is difficult to put language to, but there is structure in the way I imagine. And the best way I can describe that if you can imagine no visual imagery, but you're looking from a bird's eye view at a map.
Okay.
So I think in terms of schematics, blueprints, dynamics, and it's not that I necessarily see them, but it's like my orientation. I'm sitting in this room, right? I can shut my eyes. I know exactly where you are. I know exactly where she is. I know where all the walls are, where everything is positioned in the room. I can imagine all of that. I can't see it, but I know it, right? And not only that, but I know what your mood is. I know what her mood is, what kind of vibes y'all are giving off. I have no idea what y'all are wearing. Like even right now, if I try to remember, I was just looking at you, but I have no idea right now what you are wearing. Her either. And that used to get me in trouble in relationships. But and a lot of times I ask my wife, I'm like, what was I wearing last Sunday? Because I don't want to wear that again. So I got my eyes closed, and I know where everything's at. I can feel where everything's at, and so I guess when I would imagine like a tree planted by streams of living water, it's like without seeing this is the best way I could describe it. Without actually seeing it, I know there's like swirls of color and vibrations and lines, veins. So like the river, I know that it's like it's got veins and the water is flowing through it, and that there are seeds that are being deposited, and I can imagine where they're at in the on the banks of the river, and time compressed, and there's trees there, and they're waving in the wind. I can't see it, but I just know that they're doing that.
That's very interesting. I have a very difficult time imagining that. Like without seeing it, it's very interesting. Like I imagine your experience then of poetry is significantly different than mine.
Probably.
And most people's. That's wild to me. Like, you ever heard about people that experience like the like they see a painting and
synesthesia?
Right.
Yeah.
I love that so much. I always have one of my bucket lists is go to a museum with a synesthesia, like a person that has that condition, whatever it might be, seeing a number or smell.
So I actually have that too.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. So like, one thing is like my auditory imagination is as clear and pristine. Like if I pick a song right now, like a song that I made, right? I could play it right here and listen to it on these monitors, or I could play it in my head and it sounds exactly the same.
Oh, wow.
So I think that's also one thing that helps me to produce music is that like I'm not searching for sounds. I already hear them. I already know what the beat sounds like. Now I just got to put it all together. So, but the sometimes I say stuff and people are like, what are you talking about? But like, there's this one chick, Abby, I forget her last name, but she's in, I think, Upper Room, right? And I'm like, her voice is like a golden ribbon. Like, I can feel the texture of it. And or like that other guy from Maverick City, I think, with that very distinct voice. I think Dante maybe, or the other black guy. I forget it. Huh? Chandler. Yeah, you see the one of those. I don't remember which one, but I read a comment on YouTube. Someone said his voice is like a lion's mane. I'm like, that is exactly what that feels like. Like, I can totally relate to that. So it's like I can feel
the
textures of sounds.
Interesting.
But putting the language to it is really awkward and strange. And almost nobody knows what I'm talking about.
Well, no, that's why one reason I love poetry is that it puts words to experience, to emotion that many people just don't have the vocabulary for. Like, I got, talking about getting in trouble, when I was younger, I didn't realize how much more advanced my vocabulary was than other, kids. So I would try to have conversations I thought were like completely normal. I'm like, I'm not saying anything advanced. Of course, being a affluent, person, and like people are like, what are you even talking about? So, and having to like, and I hate to say it this way, like dumb down, but like reduce my language capacity to a level that actually is relatable. However, I realize that an adult, it's kind of a superpower because I can go and hear and read things, and like Shakespeare was not difficult for me to read. I'm like, why do people have such a hard time? It's just old English. So you change the language a little bit and it relates to the root word of the Latin. And people are like, root words in Latin? I'm like, yeah, I learned that pretty early on.
Yeah, that's like the basics.
But a lot of people just don't get taught those things, and I just have a natural proclivity to. I mean, even saying proclivity.
I don't think I had a natural proclivity. Actually, there was a guy at Astronaut High School, Mr. Gadapi, best teacher I ever had. If you ever see this man, just for your forehead, my guy. That you rocked my world in 9th grade. So he was like, "Look, y'all don't have to memorize words. I just, if you can memorize the roots, know what they mean, you can pretty much figure out what any word means. So we're going to study root words. That's what y'all are going to memorize and know what they mean. And then you'll know English." And like, that was exactly right.
It's a wise man.
And so like that changed my writing abilities. And I could totally relate. And when you said that about dumbing it down, it reminded me of Kanye West. Cause he was talking one time about like, and even with me, I could totally relate to this because old English does not sound good in rap. It's not really compatible, right? So I can change the way that I'm speaking. And, Kanye put it like, it's not that I'm being fake. It's just I have a very wide range of how I express myself. And I am very knowledgeable about words that work in poetry / rap and in conversations that are very
simplistic,
or even very high, very advanced. And I don't say that to be like, yo, I'm super smart, guys, but it's just like that's my reality. So it's like I used to feel weird about that. I used to, especially like writing these raps, and I'm using language that people will say, oh, you sound black or something, or you're trying to sound black or something. And it's like, not really. Like I'm just articulating in a way that works for this song. And when Kanye West put that idea out, I was like, dang, that there's no better way I could have explained it. And I forgot how he said it, but he was like, I could talk like this, but then I can also talk like this. I could do both. So what? Like, I'm not being fake. I'm just being me. If you have a problem with it, go somewhere else.
Yeah. That's actually a perfect segue to where I left off in the story too, coming back to the slam. So did, 4 or 5 slams and getting these horrible scores, just getting destroyed. And anybody that's done anything competitive and just getting beaten and not really sure why, you can relate, like, how psychologically challenging that can be, to just be, not knowing why and then losing, and one of the guys did me a favor, even though I didn't really see it as a favor at the time. And he was like, the guy that was the MC essentially. And he's like, listen, like, you have an incredible vocabulary. You use it very well in your poetry. It's obvious you have it you read a lot. However, a lot of the icing on the top, and then you're gonna come in on it. He's like, you should try to bring it down a little bit for your audience, and like, so you can relate to people. And I was like, my first reaction, because I've been writing for so long, and my dad was so instrumental in that moment. His philosophy was, if people don't know what you're talking about, that's their problem. They need to go find a dictionary, look it up, ask you to tell them whatever it might be. It's not your problem. You use the language if you know what it means, you use it in a sentence, you use it, whatever, and let them deal with it. And if they think you're too good or whatever, they think something, that's their problem. They're challenged by your language. However, after going and getting over myself and listening to this guy, and it took me a little bit, I'm not going to lie, I came to the conclusion, I'm like, I have a good enough vocabulary, like what you're saying with Kanye, I could write both. And that's when I really started challenging myself to like write it in a broader style. So I'm like writing some stuff for myself, and I consider it almost like neoclassical is what I call it. I don't know if that's a writing style or not, but using really advanced language, really old language to go and formulate these concepts and ideas. And then I'm also writing more, poetry that's using more simple common language and conveying more emotion through it, less cerebral concepts, more relatable concepts. Mm-hmm. And it actually became where I could come to some level of synergy between the two.
Wow.
In the recent years. And that really comes down to like what the other aspect of, I think, rap, art, music, all of it is like knowing your audience. If you're going and doing, a song or a poem for a group of people that, might be from a different side of the tracks than you're not necessarily going to go and do something that's like just so far outside of their scope that they're not going to get it. There's no point to that. Like, I used to think that would be like, well, they have to go and come down to my level. Maybe they need to learn something today. And I'm like, yeah, there is some truth to that, where you have to be yourself.
But then the only ass in the room is you.
Pretty much, like, you're just by yourself then, and you just leave everybody behind. And there's no real point to it. So I realized very quickly, I'm like, knowing your audience. And that's a lesson I'm still learning, to be honest, because sometimes I just want to do this poem. I just want to know what it feels like to perform this. And I miss the point of actually sharing art, which is showing people and sharing something that you all share in. You all get to go and experience, and maybe it's slightly outside of their scope, but on a level or in a way that they can at least grasp onto something. And I think the best writers, the best poets, best artists create in a way that on some level creates unity, creates community. Even people that create music that seems on the surface very like simplistic, even I think of Lady Gaga, actually, the first thing that comes to mind, because she said, like, she's like, when you're listening on the radio you might not get it, but when you're in the club you'll get it.
That's interesting, because like when you say simplistic about Lady Gaga, I'm like, no way. But then I just thought, like, yeah, the lyrics kind of, the lyrics definitely, but the music is That's a different animal.
And that's because you are so, I think, musically inclined, where you're going to listen to the complex levels and layers of beats. And it's similar to, poetry is relatable as well. Like, there's multiple concepts that you can go and actually infuse in one, poem. And not everybody's going to know all the context, all the, minutia and, complexity of that poem. However, if you're not having something in there to draw it all together and make it relatable, well, you're going to miss your audience.
I think you probably just gave me another key for music, because I would consider myself more a studio artist than a live artist. And I think part of it comes from just wanting to have everything done perfectly. And in the studio, you can do that, So I think, like, the problem with the studio music is that, at least nowadays, you record the track, mix and master it, you put it online, and you have no idea who your audience is.
Yeah.
So who are you writing for? And so I guess the concept that I've been running with is, like, just tell a story and see what happens. But there still is that other aspect of ministry. And, that's really the only reason I'm still in what people would name Christian rap, which part of me despises. And, like, I don't, like, part of me is like, I don't even want to do this, but it's like, there's still the ministry aspect. And also I've seen incredible fruit come out of that. And I think maybe connecting those two things might also help bring a motivation that wasn't really there before.
I think finding your audience is one. So yeah, because sometimes, you have to go to your audience. Your audience isn't going to come to you. And what you're talking about in the studio, exactly, like, you're divorced from any kind of concept of, like, who's going to be listening to it. I think the only way to really do getting it to the people that actually will be able to relate is taking it to the public. So going in, doing events, and then seeing who comes up to you afterward and actually says, I really like this. And then, actually picking their brain, talking to people about, your music, going and when you put it online, seeing who comments on it, and then actually approaching them, being like, hey, yo, what is it that you actually like about this? And you'd be surprised how people your audience can teach you a lot about your own art that you didn't know about before.
Wow. That's an incredible concept.
I've learned a lot about my poetry by listening to what people think of it. And that takes in, a level of humility, I think, that a lot of artists have a hard time with, not because artists aren't humble, but because it's so vulnerable.
Yes.
It's, when you're talking about, deep personal concepts,
and especially when it's such a flippant critique. Like, get the hell out of here. You don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, even that guy's feedback to me at first was just like, everything my father taught me came back to me, and I'm like, all right, whatever. I'll go and keep writing what I'm writing. I don't care if I'm winning your stupid slam or not. But then it was like, you got to humble yourself a little bit and be like, what is this about at the end of the day? And as believers, we believe, that there's something higher that we're trying to achieve. And I even believe that really poetry and music has a prophetic aspect to it, where you're going and hearing something or receiving something. And this even ties into why certain things are more convincing, more powerful than others. And bringing that into a form that others can then relate. And then you're creating community out of this concept, these ideas. That's why I really don't necessarily limit myself to just being a poet. I really believe at my core, I'm a prophetic individual, and then creating art and relating to art or to individuals in that kind of vein for the sake of creating health, relation, community, even like self-realization, and then all of it being tied back to scripture, all of it being tied back to the original design we have. And that's what's beautiful when people go and see, like, even talking about, you know, your ADHD and like these challenges, like being a parent versus being a painter. How is one, you know, easier for me than the other? Like, I can see pictures in my mind as you're talking, like, for, you know, when you start talking about,
I'm jealous.
you're like talking about being a painter. I'm like, yeah, that's like riding a unicycle. Like, it's hard for most people, but you just focus and you're just there. You're on that bike. But like being a parent is like riding a unicycle while juggling and then like chewing gum and then also making sure you're watching for traffic
and having a conversation
and probably like, yeah, it's like multitasking. And I can understand how someone, you know, because I can relate to that neurotype challenge, you know, when I'm doing the one thing. Like, I used to go to Barnes and Noble, and that's actually how I found that, you know, poetry group. And I would sit there for hours and just read a book. I'm like, I can go to a store and read a book that's super new. Like, it's not in the library, so I can't find it there. And I can just sit there for hours and read a book. And I literally would not even realize how much time went by. I would just look up and it'll be dark outside. And I'm like, oh, I'm hungry. Okay, I guess I need to take care of my body now. Like, and it's just that hyper focus, the ability to do that, which is super useful, like you were saying, for writing. I can sit and write a poem and I'll just be in the page.
Yeah.
And I'll just be seeing it all kind of unfolding in my mind and like it all just tying together. And
you're living it.
You don't even have to really do revision. Sometimes I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, that word, okay, and or that word switches, and it just comes out. Now, part of it is kind of like with the painting too. I'm sure it's like riding a bicycle. You've done it long enough, you can do it again, and you get better and better and better the more you do it. However, because language is my primary intelligence, and I was kind of going to tie even that in, like, everybody is unique. So I don't think there's anybody that's like, very few people that are not intelligent at all. I think many people are just very intelligent in a specific kind of way. And a lot of people haven't even explored it.
I think you're spot on with that.
Like, and people don't even realize, like, some people are artistic, but it's in one specific way. Like I knew this girl who was saying she was not artistic at all. And then we went to a museum and they had a section where you could go and do art. And she just tore pieces of paper apart and glued them back together and put some things in there. And like, after she was done, this was just for fun. Like, she wasn't even trying. And it looked like she'd been working on it for hours. She did it probably like 15 minutes. And I'm like, how do you do? And that's, I forget the name of the style of art where you go and just take pieces of paper and put them together. It's collage.
Okay. Yeah.
And I personally have a very difficult time with collage.
Where do you even start with that?
You literally ripping things apart and gluing them back together.
I'm good.
Like,
I'm good.
And seeing the different tones between
my
things.
sister loves that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I also, one time there was a recovery group for people that were going through grief counseling. And I was, you know, so you're working with kids and everything. And some of the kids had the opportunity to like paint on a poster board or like poster paint. And this, like, you would never think, I'm like, these kids are really young, whatever, they're going to paint some stuff. This girl was putting paint on the paper and in just relating colors so well together. It looked like she was a professional painter. Like, I know if she got coached by a professional for just a couple of months, she would be producing masterpieces.
Wow.
Like, stuff people would want to put in their house on their wall and be like, of course I would say, you know, a grown person creating this art, and be like, no, this is a 14-year-old that just put paint on a canvas.
It's incredible to me, the diversity of the way that people think and the different types of intelligences that we have. And I just want to encourage everybody out there, like, if you feel like you don't know what your purpose is, you have one. and there's something in you. There's a gift inside of you that's ready to be unwrapped. How do you open that gift? Jesus.
Mm-mm.
But you know, if you ain't about it, then I hope you find your answer. But man, you know what? Are we missing anything?
I guess not really. There's of course always more to talk about. But yeah, right now, I mean, I've been exploring. It's similar to yourself, you know, what career paths like make sense, you know, long term, and just seeing how in some way, shape, or form, like the literary arts is like somewhere that I'm always been passionate about, but there's so many ways of expressing it and working at it. Even being looking at going and being a book narrator, being a ebook narrator, and that's such a
I thought
huge
about
field.
that too. Yeah.
Just have a decent voice and you're able to go and read and focus, and it's like, oh, I've always been able to do that,
and speak in a way that's compelling, that people are like in the story with you. You get some of the I like ebooks, and I've listened to like the brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky, probably like 3 times, hours and days, literally days of listening. But there's this one Brit that does this reading, and it's just like, I'm so in it, and I can imagine it too, but it's through like I'll be working, right? And he'll explain, like, I love how Dostoevsky explains people's emotions and the way they move and their faces and stuff like that. And the way they exclaim, and like in the translation, there's a word that before it used to mean like shout it out, but nowadays it means something different. And every time I hear it in the book, I laugh. He's like, and he ejaculated with joy. I'm like, oh my god. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And but it's like it's funny because I'll catch myself and I'll have to look around because he'll explain the way someone moves or exclaims or whatever, and I'll have to do it to imagine it, right? I'll have to make the face or I'll have to make the movement. And then I'm like, oh shoot. Is anybody watching me right now? I probably look hella weird doing this. I'm just listening to a book. Can't imagine things visually. Don't worry about me.
That's a different way of being. Yeah. However, some people might be very jealous of your experience. You know, it'd be very interesting to think of there are other people that, like, to be able to conceptualize things the way you do is a unique gift. Especially with music, I'm sure there's many producers that wish they could go and remember the beats in the same way. Layering beats must be so much easier for you. Like, even that.
I don't even think of it as layering. It's just like, I don't know how to describe it. To me, it's not layering. It's just like, it all just works together. To me, it's like even this the frequency spectrum, you know. And I love studying frequencies and just the math of the hertz. And there's just so many cool things you could do with it. Like I showed my kids one time, I'm like, I got a tone generator and put it at like 10 hertz, and I turned it all the way up. I'm like, watch the speaker. And they're watching it, and it's going woo, 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 but you can't hear nothing. But the thing looks like you're thumping in the trunk. Right, you know what I'm saying? And it's dun 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 dun, and it's like, whoa, that's making noise, but we can't hear that.
Beyond human.
So it's like, it's so incredible to me, and I love studying this stuff. But to me, like, and I play bass, you know, like on Sundays, I love playing bass, and maybe it is, to me, a form of foundation. To me, it feels like the bass is like a foundation, right? But the layers aren't dimensional. They're like different family members coming to Thanksgiving and having a great time.
Sure. The interplay. Yeah. I mean, and there's so many ways of relating those things to other forms of art too, where the interplay of sound and the interplay of words, the meanings behind things. And that's what's incredible about performance in general is like you might do one performance one way and do the same performance another time and it just hits different.
Yeah.
And it can be the environment, it could be the acoustics, it could be your own emotional state that just changes it so drastically. And that's why I respect so many like artists that are able to do that consistently. That is incredible.
That's incredible. Like, I don't think people realize that. And like, I think a lot of people just want to get famous, but they have no idea what it takes to climb up that and stay there.
Yeah. And so I think maybe since we've been talking about this concept so much, like, but not actually stating it clearly, like art is a discipline and discipline is necessary to produce good art. And I think a lot of this, this generation is so immediacy based, so focused on just getting something right away that they don't realize how much discipline and the hard work goes into being an artist, being a creator, or a creative. And I think for myself, like,
I think that's why rap is dying, by the way.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. My struggle as a younger person, if I could go back and talk to myself, the main thing I would say is like, take your art seriously, take your poetry seriously, because I never, like, it took me so long to even, until I really had that conversation with that guy in Barnes and Noble, didn't even have the inkling that there was anything to it. It was just a journaling method for me, essentially, some way of catharsis. However, anybody that's watching that you're an artist or you're doing something, if you're passionate about it, don't stop doing it and take it seriously. Find somebody that knows what they're doing and has experience, have them show you what they do and also show them what you do, and then be humble enough to take feedback, take criticism, and grow and learn.
I concur. Yo, I think it's probably about that time.
We're good.
This has been amazing. This is like, I was so excited about this and I knew it was going to be awesome. And again, it's just beyond my expectations. And I sincerely appreciate you coming to talk with me, man. This is like, especially being a introverted guy, man. One thing for me, I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I didn't even want to do this because I'm by nature a very private person, and speaking openly about everything that I'm thinking and believing is very vulnerable. And I don't necessarily want to share everything with everybody, everywhere, whatever. But it's something that's been on my heart for a while. And, maybe I'll some other time explain the journey of how we got to this point. And I'm excited to see how, this progresses. The purpose behind all this, like I always say, I really want everybody out there to think for yourselves and to speak what you believe out loud in public. I think it's very important, especially in the day that we live in, when there's so many forces that want to shut your mouth and close your mind and control you. So, Jason, is there any way people could find your poetry online?
Not my poetry actively as outside of Amazon. I have 2 books on Amazon.
You have 2 books on Amazon. So I'll get those in the link, probably not tonight, but I'll get those links in the description if you can send those over to me.
Yeah. And then The Harbinger Speaks on Instagram and on Facebook as well, is where I'm basing all my social media.
Can you say that one more time? A little more clear?
The Harbinger Speaks.
The Harbinger Speaks.
Yes.
What is Harbinger mean?
Harbinger means messenger.
Oh, okay. I like that. It's a new word for my my vault.
Yeah. I've been told by a marketing person, shout out to Jen, that I should probably rebrand a little bit so it make it a little easier to be accessible. However, my stubborn nature with my words. I probably will be rebranding, but to JL Harbinger, so that way it includes my first and middle initial. By the way, my middle name is Lee, so it's Jason Lee Durant. But I usually go by Jason Lee on social media, just because it sounds easier, flows a little better for me.
So that's where they can find you on Facebook, Jason Lee. Remember his face so you can see his profile, unless you have aphantasia, of course. But yeah, man, this has been incredible, and I'd love to have you back again another time. And oh yeah, so we did a cold open today. Last night you came through and recorded like a 2-part poem, right? So y'all heard the first one, and now is there anything we're missing? Are we good to go?
It's been a wonderfully surreal experience.
Ain't that the truth? I'll see you all next week, same time, Tuesday, 8:30 Eastern. But for now, here's part 2.
It's confession time. I love wine. The fruit, the oak, the tannins, the notes, the joy it evokes. It's true. And from what I hear, some of y'all been sipping too. But on which wine I wonder, the old or the new? 'Cause while that old vintage might have its own allure, it's not for this time bout turned to vinegar. You better make way for what's coming through this brand new red singing, not just in your head, but in your heart too. And for anyone that's on that old swill still, don't try to repress this wondrous new. Stop being shocked by what your eyes see. Bear witness to what you've been praying to be. This momentous outpouring born of holy unity. Here's a glass. Let me pour you one, and you'll see.